Midget troll who lives in the forest, and you harass things like lizards and...
I am average height, I will have you know, for 1966.
I was going to say, for the 30s, back before they figured out milk was good for bones.
Hey there, Bob from Work, it's Constant Carter. Welcome to the OCGFAM show to you, my YouTube buddies. What's going on? Let me know in the comments and we'll talk about it after the show right now. Let's just get into the show. We're doing Viewer Questions 19. Scott, how you doing?
Bob.
Let's just get right into it.
We're going to have to. I think we're losing so many viewers that if we don't just get right into it, they're like, man, this show doesn't even exist.
Done with it. Done. So, first question. Love the channel. What? It's from...
I love the delays in between episodes the most. It gives me time to think.
It gives me time to ruminate on the whole thing.
Absorb the whole last episode. I'm ready for the next one. What's it been, 2 months?
It hasn't been 2 months, but it's been two. We've had like one show a month for. I don't know. It's bad. It's very bad.
It's been an interesting year in the industry, so.
Yeah. Well, we're gonna get through it.
We certainly are.
James Poggy, love this channel. Would love to know more about how. Now, I wanted to say something first. This is about the show I did do is I took the Bloom Strategies episode from back in the day and I put some bumpers on it and repurposed it because that is by far our most popular episode. So I want to focus on the Bloom thing because it seems like what everybody wants to focus on. So these are some Bloom questions, and then I think at the end maybe we can have a little discussion about where to go from here as far as doing a new Bloom episode. But let's get through the questions. Love the channel, would love to know more about how Pegasus interacts with Herc in reference to dosing for trying to bring out fruity terpenes.
So I guess that my question is the dosing piece of that question. You mean just as far as like how would you apply this in conjunction with Herc? Or?
Well, when I look at this, I have a question. Is like, and I'll apply this to everything. Is when we're talking about Bloom Chaos and Herc. There's kind of an interaction between those. If you use this much of this, you need to use this much of this.
Oh.
So, and I'm wondering about, generally, do you see a difference between ratios of one to the other, or is this just about 2 tablespoons of this, 3 teaspoons of that?
The ratio thing literally is it's a safeguard on Chaos to Herc.
Sure.
Because so many people wanted to... They get Chaos, they're like, oh, look, I'm just going to make all my blooms happen. I'm running Botanicare nutrients.
Yeah.
You're going to kill everything. So that's the only one we've ever really set a ratio to in the sense of and that was just literally a safeguard. That's not even the science behind it. 1 to 6 is our safeguard ratio to make sure you have 6 parts of calcium phosphate of bone meal to the 1 part Chaos to make sure you don't have tacoine or deficiencies. But that's not necessarily even like... It's not a true statement in the absolute.
So, when someone goes to the shelf and sees insane terpylation, they think, I need this for my terps, and they just pour it on anything. And you're saying Bloom Chaos is not a standalone thing.
No,
it's a thing that works with Herc. And so you're afraid that people are going to go in there and like, I want Chaos in my blooming. And they're going to...
Oh, and they do. And then they email frustrated because their plants are suffering, especially, in an Athena grow, which is all synthetic grow. They've put the Chaos in because they've heard it's done great things for a nectar grow or a form. But what it's doing is it's truly bringing up every deficiency that plant potentially has because it makes the plant accelerate all of its aspects of growing or accelerated all at once. So anything that plant was lacking going into the Chaos is going to easily be presented after the Chaos. Now with, this scenario, I've got, DJ Short's blueberry. I really want to bring out those blueberry terpenes. I don't want so much the skunk. I'm really trying to, I'm trying to dial in the terpene profiles for the blueberry. That's when this would come into play because we claim the Pegasus nitrogen proteins help bring out more fruity and floral terpenes in flower. And that's what we've seen. That's what we've seen from our extractors. That's what we've seen from our better growers. They're not pushing the Pegasus as far as I need more terps, so I'm going to hammer more Pegasus because you're just adding more nitrogen proteins. You just need, 5 to 10 mils, depending on the plant, size, age, everything. But 5 to 10 mils for just a 2 to 3 week period of time in the middle of bloom is ample enough to trigger that plant's response to develop that terpene profile, and then they usually get that smell or that aroma all the way to the end. But there's no, if you're using 1 teaspoon of Pegasus, you need 5 tablespoons of Herc, because it's not the same reaction as Chaos is with the calcium need.
Okay, so let me ask you this question. And so I'm doing my grow, and I'm looking at my feeding chart, and I'm doing everything by the feeding chart, and I feel like I got a hungry plant. And so I jump up my Herc. Do I jump up everything else in relation, or do I just throw some Herc on top of the fire and let her burn? That's probably not a good.
Well, don't let it burn. You shouldn't. But it's more of a preference at that point. If you,
I see.
If you're in the middle of bloom and you feel like you're 50 to 100 parts per million too light on your feed, bump up the things that are going to be designed for root development, flower development, terpene development, and increase your terpene or your parts per million that way. But not necessarily like always Herc is the go-to, because a lot of times it's like, hey, I can throw in more Megamorpheus to get my parts per million up there so the plant stops depleting the soil so rapidly, because right now I'm already beyond what I want to be putting in Herc.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's a tough one.
Well, that's a good answer, but brings up this question. So I'm doing my thing, and I'm going to add some more Bloom Chaos, and so I bump up my Herc. Do I bump up everything else in that circumstance as well?
Not necessarily.
Not necessarily.
No.
Okay.
No, because, if you're already at 1,200, 1,500, 1,600 parts per million, and everything's happy, fine, everything's producing just right, and you want to add a little more chaos, just add a little more Herc to balance that need, and then watch for anything else that could be a deficiency forming. What I'm seeing right now from a few people that have just perfect alkalinity water, high intensity LED lights, is no matter what, they're putting like 12, 15, 1,600 parts per million in, and they're ending up with 150 to 200 a day or two after in the soil, which is telling me that plant is so efficient, it is eating every bit of what you're giving it, and now you're just going to be trying to keep up the whole time. At that point, that's when I think one-shot becomes like the best friend, because you can build up that medium, build up a little reserve, get some of those parts per million, so every time you test it, it's not at 100. It gives that plant something to access in between those 1,600 parts per million feedings, and will also allow you to do a lot of people that are always feeding to keep ahead of their parts per million in their soil, they never get a beneficial flush out of that, or a preventative flush.
They can't ever get to flushing.
So they're always feed, and then they run into a problem because all of a sudden something just stops, the pH drops, or the lockout happens. Now they have to go to flushing, but the plants are still starving. So it's, when I see customers that are continuously coming back with the same parts per million because their plants are too efficient, that's when I highly recommend just like front loading them with one shot, and then reducing your bottle feeds by at least 15-20% as far as consistent or repetition. Keep your same recipe because obviously they like it, they've been eating it all, but by putting a little one shot reserve in there, it prevents you from having to feed 6 days a week, because you don't have to keep them alive by feeding them every day. Where if you have one shot in the soil, it's keeping them alive. You can go feed, feed, flush. And the plants are going to be way more happy because they have that reserve, so they're not always depleting themselves in the root zone.
Am I doing anything different if I was doing a feed, flush kind of situation? And they're eating everything, and so I go to some one shot to keep them fed during the low times of the flushes. Do I do the flush any differently, or do I just do it like I would always do it?
Same thing, yeah, because once you add that one shot, you've added reserve parts per million. So if you do a slurry test the next week, oh no, I'm at 800 parts per million. Well, yeah, you just put in crushed product, so it's going to be there. But now that's your new kind of, your baseline is now whatever, 700 parts per million, but you'll watch that deplete over the next few weeks. Every time you slurry, it goes from 7, 650, 6, 650, 550, and your parts per million of your liquid nutrients are always the same because you haven't changed that. You're going to see that they're still eating everything. What would be alarming is if it goes to 500, 450, and then all of a sudden to 5, then 6, then 7, and then the pH starts dropping. Now you got a whole nother problem. And usually it's all of a sudden you fed so much, the organic acids have built up, you haven't built enough pH in there, the acid starts to build, which drops the pH, parts per million start to climb because the availability is not there of the calcium, it just becomes a storm.
Is that when my flushing happens?
That's when the preventative flush is, and that would really be what's happening, why is the water, or why is your pH dropping? We'd want to discover that, because something has occurred, whether it's your water source has changed, your pH pen is not calibrated.
Something's wrong.
Something's up. So
I'm seeing 500, 400, 300. Do I re-amend my one shot?
depending on what stage you're in. If you're like in week 2 or 3 of flowering, I would add a little bit more. If I'm in week 6 or 7, now it's time to let them just go to fall, let them start fading. We don't want the high ppms in the end of flowering. We really want them to start to be reduced. So anytime, I don't like to reapply one shot unless I'm desperate. Anytime after the end of the 4th week, you shouldn't be reapplying one shot. Unless week 5, 6, 7, 8, it probably isn't worth it. Unless you're just like 100.
Am I flushing out my one shot?
No. One shot's an organic meal. I mean, it's too big to be soluble and just small enough to be fast food for the microbes. The microbes still have to break it down and make it soluble. It does reduce from the flushing, but it will not be removed. I mean, you can't flush one shot out unless all you did was water for 2 months straight.
Dumb question. I accidentally dumped 3 pounds on there. Can I flush that out? Do I need to flush that out? Can you make it too? Can you have too much one shot?
I mean,
not within reason. Can you have too much one shot?
I mean, I've started clones in 3-gallon pots of one shot only.
It's like sleeping on the tripod.
Literally, like that's the spot you're gonna choose.
So not really, no.
No, I mean it would take so much, and really what you'd see is your quality of fruit would diminish because it would be so heavy of a food source. They would always want to be greening even all the way to the end stage because there's so much food.
They can't.
Yeah, I mean it would be great for the next cycle of plants. Like recycle that soil, or I put 3 pounds in, I'd scrape off that top layer and put fresh soil in. And
you can't mess up with it. It would
make it unpalatable.
Yeah, I got you.
It won't ruin the plant, but it'll ruin the flower for your taste buds, but it would still produce.
Okay, I'm 10 days from bloom. And I'm going into flowering, and I'm looking at my whole bloom cycle ahead of me. Is part of this using Pegasus or whatever for flavors, and part of this ramping up nutrition to give them what they need to push harder. I want this terpene whatever thing. Is more of that about giving them plenty of food, or more of that about giving them flavoring things, or a little of both? Or does that make any sense?
No.
Is the nutrition
the transition piece of Pegasus going from veg and bloom? The plant's action, its mode isn't into flower development or oil production yet. It's literally in cell tissue and fiber. So in veg, we're using Pegasus way more of a grow food in a sense. I mean, people always panic because like, I don't want to use the nitrogen-based one in bloom. It's a 1-2-0, so it's not. It's like 1% nitrogen, and that 1% is a protein. So it's not even a nitrate where it's just gonna hit them with that chlorophyll greening solution. So even if I use it in veg to give all that protein to the microbes, which then delivers that growth into the plant. The plant stays healthy, green all the way through veg. Once the plant stops producing the cell tissue and the growth of the fibers, it sits down to produce the fruit. And the fruit is oil, it's just all the active ingredients in the flower and the oils. And then the Pegasus then switches its mode of action not to be a greening agent from the nitrogen proteins, but that same protein, whatever the microbes are breaking it down to, is delivering it so the plant can naturally produce this set of terpenes or this set of terpenes internally from the different protein sources or the calcium sources or whatever the food source is. Because if all you did was back on the nitrogen, your flavor is going to be very consistently the same. It's like running GH. When you're running those same 3 parts, they can all look different, they can all smell different, but the tastes are always the same. And it's because microbes and plants assimilate all these different elements and proteins from nature completely differently than a synthetic product would. Synthetic product's a recipe and bam, 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 it's always the same. If I get feather meal from Foster Farms and feather meal from Jones House of Chicken Love, those are 2 different forms of chicken feather proteins because of what they're fed, how they're, what their water source is. Do they live indoor or outdoor? Do they see the sunlight? Organic materials have such a broader reaction when it comes down to how they're being consumed and used by the plant. because it's so much more of a diverse array of elements that are in there.
Okay.
Does that make any sense? I mean,
yeah, a little bit. Well, you know, sometimes when you taste a watermelon, it's got a little cucumber taste in there, or even a tomato. There's that base, there's that base kind of flavor of a vegetable, and then you add stuff to it that makes them very different. But you can still kind of, especially when they're not done, you kind of feel a little bit of just vegetable flavor.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
So I guess when I backed up 10 days or stuff, what I was getting at is at the end of this process in Bloom, we're going to be backing off on nutrition. But at the start of it, are we pushing toward more?
Well, yeah, I mean, again, hopefully you're doing all of your testing in your room for pH and parts per million in your soil. Mm-hmm. But if you're like just on track, the plants are still developing. Now they're going to develop a different level. And to me, the fruit development is almost more intense than the vegetation development because they're putting all that weight they normally would be doing in growth in their canopies now into the fruit in their canopy, and to build the strength in the stem to hold the fruit in the canopy, and so you're still ramping up until you get into that halfway point where the plant just stops producing and wants to go into pretty much finishing in a sense. So
gotcha.
Weeks 5, 6, 7, yes, they're still producing flowers. Yes, you're still seeing weight gain, but you're not seeing, they call it the big stretch in the first 2 weeks. Once the big stretch is over, which is them just growing to the shorter light cycle, the different color spectrum of light, once they acclimate to that and their flowering cycle has triggered, they literally just go into weight-bearing development. And that's what their whole focus is on. How much oil can I produce? How many trichomes can I put on here? And how much weight can I put in the flower? And so that's when we kind of look at that week 5. Everything goes up and then comes back down. And that week, 1, 2, and 3 is early, 4, 5, 6 is mid, and 7, 8 are end. That middle one is where they're probably eating the most, consuming the most, and developing the most.
Okay.
So having Pegasus even going through there, all the way from the veg, basically the plant's method of using the proteins from the nitrogen feathers changes its action internally in the plant once the plant triggers into a different plant response. Plants have have different responses from growth as they do for flower development. And so we're catering to that plant's needs for that stage or what they're utilizing food for.
So imagine if it's a curve on the Herc. It's up, flat, drops off at the end.
Pretty much.
Is that the same with Pegasus or Morpheus or any of those things? Anything's pretty much the same.
I mean, you don't want to just on and off because they don't know what to do with that. All of a sudden you just added 400 parts per million for no reason and then take away 400 parts per million. Nobody does well with that. No. Or if, here's a yogurt cup, here's a yogurt cup, here's a buffet. No, here's a yogurt cup. You're going to want the buffet after you get the yogurt cup. So, same thing with this. Even like these autoflower guys that come out, I need the auto schedule, I'll still send out the ones we have, but everybody that I'm talking to right now takes our feeding schedule, starts at half strength, not for any other reason other than it's a mentality piece, and they literally within 3 to 4 weeks get them to full strength. And then they maintain that same feeding schedule. All of us are following for photos, and then they taper it off at the end.
So if I'm new or I have a new genetic or something's changed in my grow, I'm going to go half to full. But if I got my shit dialed, am I just going to go to full on what the feeding chart has?
If you've been using our stuff for 6 years and you've got the system.
Because the feeding chart has a ramp to it.
Yeah.
You would use that ramp.
Yeah, same ramp you've always been doing.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Trademark says, I'm using 9 bottles, so I would like to hear you talk about how to feed all these different things with a light feeder. Oh, so like he's not giving the plant a lot of food, but he's got 9 different things he wants to give it. Is there any difference than just a quarter teaspoon instead of half a teaspoon, or is it?
Yes. I honestly would keep my base nutrients, my Gaia, my Medusa, my Zeus, and my Herc, all pretty much at the base level. And I would create a base level feeding schedule in a sense. But I would take the remaining of these products that I want out of, so you have 9 total, you could use 4 consistently and religiously. The other 5, you can split those up and either give them 2 with this feed on this day and the other 3 on this feed on that day. Some people will go base food on one day, additives on the next day, so they're going back and forth. So they're not going all of 9 products into 1 gallon, trying to keep it under 1,000 parts per million because you'd be doing trace amounts. Instead, you kind of set your ppm of, all right, in veg, I'm going to max out at 800 parts per million. So I'm going to use, today I'm going to use Medusa, Gaia, Zeus, and Herc, and I'm going to get it to 800 parts per million. And this isn't for everybody's feeding schedule.
Sure, this is for light feeder, this
individual. So I'm going to feed it at 800. And now that's on Monday. So on Wednesday, I'm going to go in with my Demeters, my Athenas, my Morpheus, and my Circes, and I'm going to give them that at 800 parts per million. And going to go back and forth. So you're getting still 2 days a week of your base nutrients, 2 days a week of your additive nutrients. All together, still getting a full spectrum of the feed throughout the entire week period of time.
Until I get this dialed in, am I actually putting my truncheon in there and seeing what my parts per million are?
Well, I mean, if you're aware enough to know that you now have a light feeder, you're well aware of how to monitor. Now, most people just starting to grow, they don't know if they've got heavy feeders, light feeders. They don't even know the genetics. So start at half strength, then you go to full strength slowly over a period of time, and then watch what the plant can handle.
What does that mean when he says it's a light feeder?
It means that anything over 1,000 parts per million will either burn it, make it mad, make it hermaphrodite. It's not a performer at more. And some genetics are just
that way.
There's a lot of plants that if you just don't set it and forget it, just let it go, and they do totally fine.
Well, the wife's got all kinds of house plants, and she waters them. It's a week, maybe? I don't know. I saw her feed them something a while back. I mean, and this is obviously isn't a house plant, but some plants can live on very little food.
Most house plants die because we water them.
Yeah, that's what's killing them.
You know where they find them? In the tropics. You know who's out there? Not the water?
Not a lot of water.
So, no, that's pretty common.
Okay. Cam the Canaman. We've heard of him before. Canaman. He sang the song and the whole thing. We're going to get into the question. Would love to see a live stream and questions and answers that you could poll the community beforehand, and would love to see how to incorporate Nectar into a no-till setup. So first, the live stream thing. This is what this is. We have the questions beforehand, and we just do this. I know it isn't live.
Yeah, this is true. Believe me, most times we start this whole thing with a giant fight, and we call each other assholes and spit on each other, and then we sit down and pretend we like each other for an hour and a half, and then we go back to it.
Great.
Yeah, no,
great.
The live one get us canceled just in my language.
No, this is as live as it gets. But let's get a no-till. What do you think about doing no-till? I mean, is he talking outdoors? Is there such a thing as indoor no-till? I mean,
the act of tilling is literally breaking up the ground. So basically, no-till means when you're done, you remove one, you put a new one in, you leave it on obstructed soil.
I got
and
you.
let the biome and the living organisms in the soil balance it all out.
This is a super soil kind of situation in most cases?
It ends up being a super soil if you re-amend, but often with re-amendments you find no, don't do that there. They'd have to scratch it in, which would be considered tilling. But basically, no-till is just basically pull out, put back in, top dress teas, top dress microbes. We have a ton of people that use this in no-till situations.
Okay.
And especially outdoor because they've got giant beds. They don't have the time. They literally pull one up in the fall, add their enzymes for the winter, come right back in the spring, plant right on top of it, and then go right back to bottle feeding. Okay. So, I guess I would need to get more in depth with this individual in particular on getting in depth on no-tills. But, my whole vegetable garden is pre-amended. I don't till. They're all in raised beds, and I come through once a week and top them off with things I feel they would perform better if I gave them a more soluble form. The downfall of no-till, which is really very few, but one of them is, a lot of us want to pretend like we understand what's fully happening in the soil level, and we don't at all. Like even the soil scientists are just at about a 70% knowing, and that's a total pull out of my ass percentage.
Yeah.
They don't know everything that's happening. It's like the ocean. Yeah. It's like what we know is what we're aware of, but what we don't know could be affecting this huge piece of this, and we're reacting to this little piece we know. So it's a tough...
Well, the forest is no-till. Absolutely. But you'll see big meadows, and you'll see a bunch of dead trees, and you'll see stuff going on here. There's no stakes out there. It doesn't have to work. But in your garden, it kind of has to work, which makes it more difficult to have a natural system because you're just getting lucky if you happen to be in the natural right piece of soil for what you're doing.
And nobody has a piece of land that gathers every bit of nutrition and nutrient element that plants need for every single run without having a no-till. Tilling, basically, it kills your your bacteria and your mycorrhiza and your
Yeah.
fungus. So that's why if you till, you're destroying life, which then allows it to dry, which then allows it to become airborne, which then creates dust bowls. But if
Yes.
we don't till, and the microbes do glue the soil to the ground because they are consuming and digesting and pooping everything out into a glue, then you get a better, altogether, better soil.
Yeah.
But it takes a long time to build that, and then even longer time to maintain it. I mean,
Yeah. Well, when you go through the valley out here in the summer and you see a tractor driving through a field, and the soil, you can just see it flying away, because it's so dusty out there. And they've killed that soil. That's a very different thing than having a garden where you've dug a little bit with a trowel.
Yeah.
So okay.
yeah.
So we've just talked about our opinion about no-till, but not answered his question about a no-till setup. If you were just trying to kind of with your garden,
Yeah, I mean,
what
I
do you
don't-
do with your garden?
Like I said, I mean, I start the season by top dressing with my one shot and my microbes, and put a nice ground cover on top of that, and then I come in and I feed them off of the bottles when I feel I want to push them. I want things to happen faster. I want things to respond quicker because I can't control the soil's response time.
Sure.
I can't tell bacteria to eat faster or eat slower. I can't tell mycorrhiza to expand or detract. So the nice thing about having the bottle for me is that I can come in. I mean, we're in Oregon. We get this many days without a frost, and if you're not done, you're done.
Yeah. I mean, it's not done.
You got it done.
It's done one way or another.
Yeah, I try to push it a little bit further than most will do in their gardens, but I also need my food out of it by the end of the season.
Yeah.
For indoor, under lights, your own environment, I mean, you've created your whole environment. No-till indoor gardening isn't such a huge deal. I think the biggest mistake most indoor no-till guys, too small of pots. They get too root bound too fast. There is no soil left, so there's no point of no-till when you can't till it to begin with. So usually you see that in like big 100-gallon pots or larger beds in indoors.
Okay. Good answer. Stephen Mayo. I want your DOI, mayonnaise!
What?
Officer to gentleman.
Oh.
That was...
So everybody over 50 understood that.
You don't got no friends, all you got is customers. He was selling the belt buckles.
Oh yeah.
All right, he says, can you add in how to adjust the ratios of this? He's talking about when we make the new video about bloom. Can you add in how to adjust the ratios of base nutrients when adding something to aid flavor? Mostly how to add the nitrogen-based nutes to mid and late flower plants.
So again, I think this comes back to that Pegasus piece because that's the only one that's really going to be nitrogen-based for enhancing the terpene. And really, it's only the fruity and flowery terpy plants would you want to put the Pegasus on. If you're running diesel or GMO or something in the realm of like a funk or a gas or a fuely one, Pegasus isn't even going to come into that play anymore. So it's literally just for the fruiting and flowering ones. But, I always, again, it comes down to if the plants are performing well, everything's looking great, you've been operating at this X level of parts per million, what I just kind of take those same components, whether it's Herc, Circes, Pegasus, Persephone, Tritons, and kind of look at my big whole picture of I'm not exceeding 2,400 parts per million in my nutrition. So by trying to make my diesel come out of my diesel plants or the fuel aroma to come out of my diesel plants, I'm not going to quadruple Tritons while maintaining Herc and Pegasus and all these other numbers. I kind of, work them that I'm not trying to get the floral, so I'm going to pull Pegasus out. I'm going to pull Persephone out, and I'm going to add this Tritons in at a higher level. And try to push that for that smell. Now, that's a tough question in, how there's so many factors at play between the plant's environments, genetics, and you, that there's no perfect ratio difference between these 5 different elements to make these different terpenes happen. You kind of got to work with your genetics to see which ones make these things happen better.
So all these Persephones, Circes, things like this that you might use for flavor are uniquely different than Pegasus because of the nitrogen component?
Well, and that's the nitrogen component's 1%. So I mean,
gotcha.
I think the problem is people hear it. That's what we promoted to green up
I
things.
gotcha.
But it's a protein, so unless it's not a nitrate, it's not growing the plant with elongation because of the nitrate.
Okay. It's just
literally just offering a food source that's a protein from a nitrogen amino acid versus a nitrate from urea or salt.
Why do you mention Pegasus but not Megamorpheus? Isn't it
040? I mean,
it's so little nitrogen.
There's none in there.
Oh, because it's guano in my mind.
That's phosphorus guano.
Yeah,
that's
in my mind that's nitrogen, but that's not the case.
No, we get the fossilized ones, so there's no nitrates left. Because like in guanos, what people don't get is like in a bat cave.
Yeah.
When you get fossilized bat guano, that means that it's here on a cave. Nitrogen bat guano is where all the piss and poop
it's all the stuff up on
dead
top.
insects and cockroaches live here. And as this ages, it dissipates. All the nitrogen gas is off into this level. So even the nitrogen from the bottom half will affect the upper nitrogen level because it's releasing up through the guano.
Okay.
So the top fresh stuff, which is like poop out of your toilet, will have the most nitrogen. Now the poop on the side of the road that's been there for 12 years in the sun, that's white, is now just pure calcium phosphate.
I gotcha. So, and even though it's bird guano, not bat guano, it is the same situation. Where do they get that? Just out of curiosity, that it's off some rock out in... Yeah.
It's a horrible job, but Peruvian, a lot of it's like Peruvian seabird guano comes off of cliffs and rock faces, and there's a few islands that are literally just shit islands. And so they're driving down the 101, and you drive into Reedsport heading south, and you look in your rear view, right over you go to the bridge. There's a bridge that hits an island and then crosses over two lengths of river. There's an island in the middle. That whole island is a seabird guano island.
And it's not snow on that.
It's dead. It's like rotten, salty death. I mean, it killed every bit of vegetation on this island. It's where they go to shit for some reason. It literally is a white pile of dead island. It's crazy. Reedsport, Oregon.
Okay. Tourist attraction.
Yeah. Bring your shovel.
Stigma Shooter 556. Good to see you, Bob. I assume he meant you too. It's probably because I did that little video where I hadn't been... Oh, it's because I hadn't been on the thing in so long. It's just... He was glad that I was back and not dead. It's definitely hard for me to suggest anything new for the show when I'm still learning things in viewer questions videos that are years old. I've watched 2 or 3 times, I might add, LOL. Only thing I could recommend is running some community polls for different topics of discussions and maybe showing some gardens from dedicated nectar growers once a week in the garden, so that kind of deal. I'm kind of wandering here because it's long. Or just create an entirely new second show. But so... I have a thing here. We have many loyal viewers that probably never do comments, and there's a few people that are really engaged that comment on this stuff, and so we get their comments more than maybe other people. Maybe we could do some sort of polls or something so that someone doesn't have to write down a comment. They can just click a button. So that's a pretty good idea, don't you think?
Bob, come up with some polls.
I'm coming up with some polls.
Yep, and then you can click a button and say, this is what I want you to talk about.
So, Garden of the Week. A lot of these people are...
Not in states that really want to let you know about it.
Yeah, they're pretty low-key and far away from us.
Yeah, the downfall around here is most of the farms that we deal with locally are outside of the area, so it's tough. Yeah. And then a lot of those may or may not be, part of the system in a sense where...
They may be Spartans. Living off the land.
Yep, rogue Spartans. I would love to be in a world where we could just walk through. I mean, the other problem, too, is that the Garden of the Week would also remove... How many shows do we have?
Yeah, that's
the other issue is that Downfalls YouTube already has us on a, hey, we're watching you. All we're waiting for is that one plant material and a few more bad words from you and you're done. So it's one of those where, we need to archive a lot of our episodes so that we have them, and then we can lose everything then.
It may seem that we're circumspect, but we are actually on the edge of what we can say.
Oh, yeah. No, we don't want to get it canceled off to where we can't even have this conversation anymore.
Well, and in fairness to them, they're dealing with regulations with people. They have to, so it's... Well, maybe we don't need to be fair to them. You're looking in your eye.
We need to be fair to the big techs on YouTube and Instagram and shit, Maybe Mark Zuckerberg should look into us and help us out.
Well, they have given us a platform. Let's move on. We're straying into politics, which is... We should do a politics blog, except we'd be...
Canceled. We'd be 45 seconds in and we'd both be canceled.
Okay, so that's all the questions from the viewer questions. But I'm getting to it.
I see what you did.
Yeah, this is that Scott put on here. This is someone you were now. It's someone.
First, I want to read this text I just got.
Lay it on me.
I won't say the name, but 2 calls from 2 different people that had to switch cocoa from Mother Earth because it was full of plastic and garbage.
Jesus.
Now they're having other issues like salt. Well, they asked, what would you use? And I said, nectar for the gods. I just thought that was interesting because that's very interesting.
It's a mess out there, supply chain and all that, but that's something else we probably don't want to get into because
I'm in it and you talk about it.
Yep.
Big difference in realities there.
Big difference.
Yep, I pay for mine and you talk about it.
Well, see, that's what I like, is I prefer to be more of a, they say you talk the talk or you walk the walk. I prefer to talk the talk.
Yeah, I would too. Because walking, it sucks balls right now. I walk the walk and it's painful.
So, this is who, you don't have to say who this was, but can you give us some substance on what's going on with this? We have some questions from someone on the East Coast.
Oh, yeah, and I mean, his latest question was, how do I watch this live? Which goes to the last... Because I'm like, hey, give me a couple questions. I'm doing a show here today. No, this is a gentleman that, not a dumb person at all, very intelligent, has developed a couple main, he did a lot of the tech stuff for people like Google and Instagram and a lot of different platforms.
I know you definitely.
Yeah. Okay. So, very smart guy. He owned his own brewery, sold that off, but decided to dabble in this game. Not in a great state for what he's doing yet.
So, scientific method kind of guy.
Very methodically researching everything. To the point where he keeps sending me messages going, well, I've researched this all the way for 14 straight hours, and I just realized that your industry's full of shit. And it's hilarious because he's not afraid to call every manufacturer, every grower, every breeder. He'll get right in their face and try to get the information, and then he'll call you out for blowing smoke up his ass or not.
Yeah.
So we've taken him from Blurple Lights and Roots Organics teas and crap to our full program over the years, and I fucking say that with a smile, but literally just a bunch of garbage, and he's never really had an awesome run, and we're still struggling. I think there's a whole other piece to this, but he's been a student of mine now for about a year, and we're now coming to a head where he's
still flying in the weather, but he's a little more stable, and he's feeling like he's a little further off the ground.
Yeah, and the downfall is he's in a state where you can't just go down to the corner store and find the best damn genetics because they've been bred out and this is it. These are tried and true. He's got to get stuff shipped all over the country to him in hopes that they're the tried and true because they say so on the marketing. So
dirtweed shit.
But he asks questions that are legit. He asks questions that people want to know, and like I said, he researched every one of our episodes to find these questions because again, as we talk about how do you manipulate this or that to get this fruity terpene to this, there's so many different variables. This is why me and him are having this one-on-one conversation, but I thought I'd bring in this one-on-one conversation so people understand it.
How much calcium do you need? How do you know if it's too much? What does it do to ppms? And if it raises ppms, what would that not give a high ppm ready and short you on other nutrients? Hard to know where between 2 tablespoons and 6 tablespoons of Herculean Harvest to use, and if it's throwing off my other readings. That's a good question.
It is, however, he's assuming that
this is
bone meal is calcium. And it's so much more than calcium. There's calcium in bone, there's calcium in milk, there's calcium in limestone, there's calcium in rock, there's calcium in a lot of things we put in. Now, calcium, there's no such thing as too much calcium. There's too much calcium phosphate, there's too much calcium, nitrate, there's too much. So it depends on the form, but just calcium. you're not going to overdo, like calcite calcium, you're not going to be able to overdo calcite.
You could pour it that thick on top.
It could be your drainage. It could be your perlite. Literally, unless your water. So basically, most of these calcium forms that were like limestone and whatever, dolomite lime, or too much of that in a potting mix will make the pH too high. But really, if you're running any type of water in a neutral or acidic, that too high will completely reduce itself down rapidly and be not too much again very quickly.
Well, I think someone who made a lot of money from selling milk found that the word calcium worked.
Yeah.
But a calf does not need just calcium, it needs complete nutrition. And a mother's milk, cow's milk, has all kinds of stuff in it.
Yep.
And so I think that's kind of the misinterpretation of...
2 to 6 tablespoons of Herculean is calcium phosphate with a ton of phosphorus, which milk isn't loaded up with either. So it's really just part of that whole breakdown, how it's being digested, how it's being available. So on that, it's not throwing your numbers off that much as far as the calcium parts from milk.
Okay.
So now what's really going to throw your numbers off is when you're only hammering calcium phosphate from bone meal without all the other nutrition to balance the plants. So if you're at 6 tablespoons, you should be at, at least 10 to 15 mils of your base nutrients and you're pushing to that 6 with your Herc. You shouldn't be at 6 Herc and no Medusa and Gaia to keep your numbers right, if that makes sense.
It does.
Right.
It does. Okay, I don't understand this other question.
So the next thing he was saying was, per my instructions, because now he's been... I can read it.
Yeah.
We don't even have to break it all down there.
Okay.
Basically, he was having issues with... he had a one bad round with Bloom Chaos. Sorry, put Bloom Chaos aside.
Too much Bloom Chaos.
We didn't have his pH under control because of everything else we discovered a lot in this guy's growth. One of these days we'll actually have him on.
That'd be great.
And you guys you two do a Q&A, and he's literally going to be writing a book on everything that made him fail before he could succeed. And it's great because he's stuck to this the whole time.
20,000 easy steps to grow with nectar.
To grow weed. Well, a good weed.
Yeah.
I just need to find what that base was. Okay, so what he wanted to start reintroducing chaos, and he was very scared. So I was like, "Hey, what you want to do is just start doing 1 mil per quart as a foliar twice a week. 1 mil of chaos per quart of water. Then the next week go to 1.5 mils. Next week go to 2. Next week go to 2.5. Slowly increase it until you get into the flowering stage." And then his question really was, so I'm at 1 to 2 to 3 to 5. At what point do I transition into flowering, and how do I transition into flowering?
Okay.
Well, because we have a foliar application to begin with, so 5 mils per quart, and then people don't understand why we go to 5 mils per gallon. What people don't understand is you're not feeding that whole foliar quart to one plant. That 5 mils is being spread amongst probably 5 to 20 plants of foliar feeding.
Okay.
So really, each plant's getting effectively about 1/4 mil, or maybe 1/10 of a mil.
Yeah.
Now,
it's just common sense, but you don't think of it that way when you're looking
you
at a
see
chart.
application rates, and you're going, "Oh my gosh, why 5 mils here?"
Yeah.
Well, 5 mils amongst 20 plants versus 10 mils per plant.
And often you don't even use that whole thing.
No, I rarely do.
Yeah.
So basically, how do I transition into the root drench to 5 mils every day? And it's like, well, if you've acclimated them all the way through veg, they're used to the chaos going in as a foliar regularly. Now you go into the bloom stage. If you're maxing out at 5 mils per quart as a foliar in week 1 of flowering and you want to transition into bloom, start with 5 mils per gallon.
This are roughly analogs.
Yes,
it's not like you're upping the dosage.
No, you've now hammered them so many times with it. They're acclimated to it. Now give them more or else they're going to be mad at you.
I gotcha.
So
it's opposite of what you think.
And you're putting it into the 15, 20, 25 gallon pot of soil,
spread out,
which will hold that whole gallon at 5 mils. So it's not going to just react with a 2 gallon root ball and going, okay, well, 5 mils all at once. So it's just acclimating them in and then slowly transition them into bloom. It's just turn off the foliar and put the 5 mils in. 5 mils being our standard in the bloom as a water into the root zone is plenty. And if you have a very hungry, very strong, very aggressive plant, you can bump that up to 7.5 mils the next time, up to 10 mils without a problem. He says, I want to get up to 15. Don't, not yet, guy I'm talking about, because we need to still figure out how your plant's acclimated to the foliar feeding all the way through. Although, I mean,
would you stop foliar feeding when you start root drenching?
I do,
but this is
because I don't, because my foliar feeding is developing branches, it's developing internodal spacing, and it's developing flower sites.
Okay.
Once I'm in bloom, I'm not doing that anymore. I just want to develop fruit, so I put it all into the body for it to develop fruit with.
Okay, so let me understand then. Are you doing foliar all the way through veg and then switching to root at bloom?
Unless I need my plants to get taller, then I'll root drench in veg to give all that energy into the roots to then let the plants grow tall, where if I'm foliar feeding in veg, it's putting all that energy in the tops to prevent it from growing tall. Instead, they grow out and become branchy.
Okay.
So it literally is watering it in triggers all of the plant's growth response or fruit development response. Foliar feeding it focuses on developing all the internodal spacing and more branching, but keeping the plant more stout and shrub-like.
Okay. All right, I got it.
I'm just trying to find it.
Yeah.
He's doing pretty darn...
That's cool.
I don't know. He's had good runs. He's had bad runs. We've had all sorts of little issues here and there. And, this guy tests everything he can to see how he can destroy stuff. And one thing he really can't stand is our industry's controllers, our industry's meters. He has 3 pH meters, and not one of them reads the same. He has many different dehumidifying, AC. I mean, he's gone through... many companies. I would love to be a fly in the wall in his house when he's attacking these people, because he's just like, this is 7 degrees off. That's tragic. Yeah. You can't be 7 degrees off when it comes to a high-low.
And I've watched some videos about machining, and it's not your instrument that it's off. It's your measuring, the little... A machine tool doesn't. It's way off. You have to measure it every single time with these little micrometers, and you have to adjust the micrometer to a little block to register it in the whole thing.
Yep.
And so there's just not this. There's no way of calibrating the whole system that's reliable.
And really, like I tell people, have some litmus paper on the side for your pH meters, especially. I mean, TDS or parts per million. I don't care if your thing comes out of the gate reading 1,000, it goes up to 9,000. That's all a reference. I mean, to me, I'm looking at the plant health. If they're showing me health and the soil says 1,500 parts per million, there's something wrong with my meter, because they're not going to be this healthy at 1,500 parts per million. So I use my ppms more of a guide to tell me what the trend is for the plant.
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
In the airplane, they got the little ball. And it tells you if you're going sideways or if you're going up or down, so that you can kind of see make sure you're not upside down when you're in the clouds.
Yeah, level.
And it doesn't really. It's kind of got measurements on it, but mostly it's just like, I'm okay. I'm still level. I'm still going.
That's basically what my ppm meter. But pH, like he literally had one that was off by 0.7.
That's the whole range of 6 to 6.
That's literally like, why is everyone fucking starving?
Well, you're outside the margin.
You're really at 5.5. So the whole time, we've been. Why do they look great in veg and die in bloom?
Yeah,
well, 5.5. That makes a lot of sense. So
because if you were a couple off, you at 6.5, you're okay no matter what. But if you're 7.7 off, you could be at 6.5 and you're outside the range entirely.
Exactly. Yeah. I'm just trying to find his latest picture here. He's doing all right. I mean, where the hell are they? How do I lose them?
I don't know.
Oh, jeez.
So, we're doing an episode about bloom. Or we're gonna, and we did, and it's very popular. So, is bloom really that significant to the entire plant cycle? I mean, is there...
Well, it's kind of why everybody gets into the game.
Yeah,
but they don't go, hey, I grow the best vegetated plant out there.
Well, but I mean, as far as your growing style and technique and what you're doing, was your bloom stuff set in the first 4 weeks of veg when you were doing it? Or is there actually a big difference to be made by really focusing on what you do in bloom over what you did in veg?
As far as a gardener?
Yes, as far as the gardener.
No, I think a bloom is far more important because a veg you could literally pee in a gallon of water and give them that, and they'll veg through the cycle regardless. I think that last stage of veg, the last stage of the plant's vegetative cycle going into the flowering cycle, I think, is when it becomes important for us to get involved and really make the difference on how that plant is going to produce during the flowering cycle. If we can get in there right before they transition, start changing the diet, if you will, the menu for the plant to consume, and start pushing the plant towards this tendency to want to be bringing up calcium and phosphate, then I think we can manipulate that at the end of veg by changing up their food sources, reducing some of the nitrogen, getting them to convert before we do the light switch. So when we do switch the lighting back, they just go right into development, and because they're kind of like, oh, well, we kind of got a sense you wanted us to go here because we started seeing the lack of nitrogen proteins, and now we're getting more of this calcium phosphate in here. It looks like we should be flowering now.
So this is more about what they're eating, not how much they're eating, as far as making a distinction to optimize bloom.
Well, and you can't, I mean, that's why we put that feeding schedule out for the masses, is because we didn't want to come up with that, or else, 66% of the people would hate us because it's not going to work for them.
Sure.
So you just have to be paying attention to what that plant, there's so many variables. If your pots are small, you can't feed them the way if somebody had a 15-gallon pot, 20-gallon pot, or 50-gallon pot. So if you're in threes, you're going to be having to feed them a lot more and be very, very detailed on what you're giving them because they don't have a lot of reserve area to hold anything extra. So this is why I don't like the industry in the sense of, just follow our feeding schedule. Well, my feeding schedule doesn't ask you what size pot are you in, what kind of potting soil are you in, is it an autoflower, is it a sativa, is it an indica, is it, paraquat? I mean...
Yeah. So how do I, if I'm just starting out learning this, I mean,
you start off with the 4 basic products. You follow the Spartan recipe. If you like how it turned out, then you start manipulating that recipe to make it better, and rarely does it ever make it worse. But if you start, most people that join on our program, they're like, I want it all, and I'm going to go Roman, and you're like, why? You have no idea what this will do for you, so stick with 4. Next time, add 1 or 2 and see how these work for you, because if they're going to benefit you, you better know why they're benefiting you before you're just throwing money into the recipe because my homie told me or this is how it is. Don't just keep adding bottles without understanding why that bottle's being added.
And one shot is a safety factor.
One shot just... To me, that's the training wheels, but the training wheels with a lot of benefit.
That you can...
Well, it's like those guys that, they rode motorcycles all their lives, they got too old, and they're like, I'll just put the training wheels back on, and then you see the trikes again, and you're going, there's a guy who's been through it all. He started
through it all. See, I like those guys with the 2 wheels on the back. The 2 wheels on the front...
Oh, those aren't motorcycles.
But here's the thing, and I just realized this yesterday. No, it's not a motorcycle, but if in your brain you think of it as a snowmobile for the land, it's an awesome vehicle.
Well, it's like a moped.
Yes.
And fat chicks.
I did have one last question. So That's
right. You just heard it, didn't you?
Yeah. See,
they're
that's
both
very
fun to
true.
ride until your homie sees you on one.
That's very true.
That's the same snowmobile land thing. I'd much prefer being on a snowmobile on land.
Yeah, it's a snowmobile for driving. They're probably not good off road, though, are they?
Those
things are
good on road. I mean, you turn left and you're eating pavement. I mean, at least the back wheels, it's like you skip a little bit. And those trike ones, they're still a motorcycle.
Yeah,
and they just put 2 wheels next to the back wheels. So they're 3-wheel.
They've been riding forever, and so
they can't hold up 350-pound bike anymore with their little timber leg because they're all 80 years old.
I know this old guy. He's not that old. I mean, he's like 60 or something. But he's been riding a Harley since he was 4. And he went out riding with one of the other guys from work who had this, Kawasaki insane bike. And that guy comes back, he's like, I couldn't keep up with him. He's on his bagger, just sliding through the corners. And the guy on the, dragging his knee, and he still can't keep up with him.
Yeah, C8 Vet limousine.
Yep.
Let's go to the coast.
Yeah.
Probably going to get there a little quicker.
Yeah. So, in the way that one shot is the safety factor, Is also a bigger pot with more soil a safety factor?
Oh, it's a buffer for sure. There's a win and there's benefits and there's a negative to that.
Yeah.
The negative to that is most new growers want so badly, like the houseplant situation, they want to water, they want to feed, they want to be in there, they want to love that plant. Well, huge volume of soil and you water, or feed. Yeah, you just become, oxygenless soil becomes a swamp, plants suffer.
Because they can't suck, they can't eat it all, they can't drink it all.
They're not drinking it. So you want to be very, you want to grow into the pots that you're going to grow in.
I got you. So the one shot
it is a nice buffer, but for the most, those are great buffers. I'm a 5-year veteran. I've been 3-gallon, 5-gallon pot. How do I get more reserves in the flowering cycle so I'm not rip out at the end? Step up to a 15.
How do I leave for a day or two? How do I?
You need the volume, and we can coach you into a 25-gallon pot, and the 10-week indoor grow can still be root bound. You just have to learn how to feed more frequently, less volume, so you're not saturating, but you're giving them enough to utilize, consume, absorb, grow, and then be dry the next day so you can give them the same amount again and again. You can do that in a giant pot, but you have to do it much less volume, way more frequently. Oh my gosh, my nerves and my nose are freaking out today.
Can you imagine?
Sucks, because I can't itch them, but they itch. And it's not cocaine, I promise you that. Or I'd be going, freaking itch, man.
Jeez.
Yeah.
That's a show, right? Yeah.
Probably until we see the subscriptions come.
Yeah. No, we'll just keep hammering away at it. So we'll see you next week.